Welcome back to Andersen Acres. Today we're talking about being a rabbit genetic detective in regards to their color. And today we're talking about white rabbits. This is a red-eyed white, okay? It's a red-eyed white boy. This also applies to blue-eyed whites. So what's the difference between a red-eyed white and a blue-eyed white? Well, that's interesting because they have almost the same results. A pure white rabbit, one has red eyes, one has blue. The difference is, one, they're different gene sequences. It is possible for you to carry the gene for red-eyed white and blue-eyed white in the same rabbit because they're two different gene sequences. But what about the actual difference? So, like the visible difference. One has red eyes. The red-eyed rabbit is the great deleter. It basically erases all the colors. Okay? That's basically what happens with him. He, beautiful rabbit that he is, would have color, except his red gene deleted it. So what about the blue-eyed whites? Now, I breed Holland Lops, and I have blue-eyed white Holland Lops. What about them? Well, in the case of the blue-eyed whites, it's the great cover, okay? So the reason you see the red in this rabbit's eyes is because the red-eyed white gene deletes the color in the eye. So you see the blood circulating behind the eye. You would see that in humans too if they didn't have pigment in their eyes. If we didn't have brown eyes or blue eyes or green eyes or whatever. So that's the same with rabbits. When you delete the pigment of the iris, all you see is the blood circulating behind the eye. With the blue-eyed white, it didn't delete the color, it simply covered it up with the white fur and the blue eyes. Okay, so that's the essential difference between them. How do you tell their genetics? How do you tell? He obviously inherited 2 copies of the red-eyed white gene, making him a red-eyed white rabbit. But what color is he actually? If you bred him to another rabbit, what color would he pass down? Well, we're just going to adjust the camera. There we go. Well, let's talk about that because it can be tricky. First of all, he's too young to breed, obviously. He's only a few weeks old. So you have to start by examining the parents. So his parents. Stump is a chocolate otter, but his dad is a lynx. A lynx is a dilute of a chocolate agouti, okay, a chestnut. Dilute that down, it becomes a lynx. He's very pretty. So we have a chocolate otter as mama and a lynx as papa. Okay, where does that leave him? Let's start talking about his genetic code. Okay, we'll start listing it across the top. And we're going to do the genes in order. So let's start with the A gene. The A gene is the agouti gene. And you have 3 options here. Are you agouti? Maybe. Are you tan? Or are you self? Now, tan is also known as otter. Agouti is 3, sometimes more, bands of color on a single hair. And self is solid color. So your hairs are solid color. Every hair on your body is the same color. And in order of dominance, it's agouti, tan, and self. Okay. Remember, we said his mom is a chocolate otter, which is tan, and dad is a lynx, which is agouti. Now, I know from their parents and their breeding, because they produced solid color babies, that mama carries tan and self, and papa carries agouti and self. Where does that leave him? Well, he could have inherited a tan from his mom and an agouti from his dad, which makes him agouti. He could have taken that agouti from his dad and combined it with the self from his mom. That also makes him agouti. Agouti is the most dominant. But he could have taken the tan from his mom and the self from his dad, making him a tan. Or he could have inherited self from both parents, making him a solid color rabbit. We actually don't know. He's obviously too young to have test bred. So we don't know. So for now, he's a blank. That's just what he has to be. We don't know. And when you don't know, you don't guess. Okay? You don't go, well, there's a chance probably that he inherited at least 1 self gene. Yeah, there's a good chance because there's 2 self genes in the 4 genes. But you don't guess. You list it blank. Okay? Blank. Let's move on to the B gene. This is the are you black or are you brown? There are only 2 colors of rabbit. I know there's a lot of variation in how they look. But talking about their genotype, there's only 2 actual colors. There's black and there's brown. So black is dominant. In order to be brown, you have to have 2 copies of the brown. Remember that I said mama is a chocolate otter, which is brown, and papa is a lynx, which is also brown based. That means both parents only have little b's, brown genes. That makes him that. 100%. 100% everything else. Okay? That we know. Because if the parent is brown and the other parent is brown, they can only produce brown babies. They don't have the black gene. Therefore, even though he's white, he is actually a brown rabbit. I know that sounds ridiculous. I know, because he's a white rabbit. But he's actually a brown rabbit genetically. So your phenotype is what you look like. Your genotype is what you actually are. And genetically, he's a brown rabbit. So let's move on to the C gene. I hate the C series. I hate it. It's so annoying. This is where you get your Himalayan, your red-eyed white is the bottom of the series, the most recessive, and then you have your Himalayans, and you have your chinchillas, and then you have your regular rabbits. So in our herd, we do not have the chinchilla genes. There's 2. There's a light and a dark chinchilla gene. We don't have that. We also don't have Himalayan. So we know that his parents carry 1 copy each of this gene. Okay? And this is represented by a little c. We know his parents carry that because otherwise he wouldn't exist. You need 2 copies of that little baby c in order to be a red-eyed white. He obviously got 2 copies because he's a red-eyed white. So his C series looks like that. Okay? What about his D series? His D series means dilute. Okay? This one is an interesting conundrum because we actually don't know. So his dad is a double dilute. So dilute is either you're intense, which is the standard, or you're dilute, which is recessive. So his dad is dilute, which means he carries 2 little d's for his dilute gene. Mama for sure carries 1 big D, but she also carries a little d. And that's what's screwing us up, is that second little d. She has a recessive dilute. And we know that because a couple of her babies, when she was bred to Silverado, are dilutes. Okay, we have a lynx in the group. Okay. That means we don't know. We know he got 1 little dilute from his dad. So his second gene is a little d. The first gene, we don't know. He could have gotten the big D from mama or the little d from mama. We don't know. We can't tell. White doesn't dilute. It's white. So let's move on to the E, which is the extension series. This is the one that covers your steel, which is the most dominant. We don't have steel in our herd. There's no steel. So we don't have steel. And then you have your standard, which is just normal, just your normal large E. And after that, you have things like your torts and your harlequins. We don't have tort or harlequin in our Rexes. I have it in my lops, but it's not in our Rexes. So because it's not in our Rexes, man, you're soft. But because it's not in our Rexes, we don't have that at all. So we know that he's just 2 biggies. Okay? He's just 2 biggies. He doesn't carry anything else. Hi. And then the other thing that you can sometimes consider is Vienna mark. He doesn't have a Vienna mark. Our Rexes don't carry the blue-eyed white gene, which is the Vienna gene, but they could, right? They could carry it, but they don't. So for him, he's got 2 regular V's. He doesn't carry Vienna. Okay? He simply doesn't. You need 2 little V's, 2 matching V's to be Vienna'd, and he's not. He doesn't have any of them. So we can just ignore the Vienna gene entirely. We won't even include it in his genetic structure because it's irrelevant. So how do we fill in those gaps? Remember, we don't know A at all. We do know B, both of them. We know his C's because he's red-eyed white, so he's got 2 little C's. His D, we're not sure. His E, we are sure. So how do we fill in that A and that D? The only way to do that is to test breed him. The best way to test breed him, so we know he's brown, so it doesn't really matter if the doe is black or brown, but the best way to test breed him to find out if we have a dilute present or any of the agouti or tan genes, breed him to a dilute brown or black. It doesn't matter because we know he's brown. We already have that figured out. So if we didn't know if he was brown or black, you would want to breed him to a dilute brown, which is a lilac. So that would be your best bet because you want that solid color. You want to go as recessive as you can so that you can pull out his dominant genes. Okay, so get your most recessive rabbit, which is solid color, self, and brown if you can. With him, it doesn't matter because we know his brown, but go self, solid color rabbit, brown, okay? Go dilute if you can. Hi. And try to use someone that doesn't have Himalayan or any of the steels or anything like that in them, okay? Or any of the Harlequin, any of the chinchillas. Try to make sure that they don't have any of that. I'm just going to pull you out from behind my neck. That's irritating when you start nibbling on my hair. So go as recessive as you can. So ideally, I would breed him to probably, if I were to keep him, we're not keeping him. In fact, he's going home later today. But if we were going to keep him, I would breed him to our dilute doe Smeagol because she is blue and she carries the double dilute. It doesn't matter if she's blue or black or brown. It doesn't matter if she's blue or lilac because, frankly, we already know his brown. So that's how you have to do it. You have to play, first of all, look at the parents. What could he possibly have inherited? And if you can't figure out a couple of the genes, then absolutely what you need to do is test breed him to a female, or obviously if this was a female, to a male, that is as dilute as possible, as recessive as possible. So you want your dilutes, your browns, as much as you can. Your ideal candidate would be a lilac rabbit, because that is as recessive as you're possibly going to get. Otherwise, it's just a guessing game. And in genetics, we don't guess. We write down what we know, and then we investigate for the rest. And investigating is usually test breeding. Anyway, that is about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. See you tomorrow.